Chat, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the stream. It's Wednesday. We're being given another gift by the Warhamster. How's it going, everyone? I'm still at my my family's place, so we are. So I'm still out of my normal recording studio, but I'll be like this for the next week or so. I did just do the entire intro to this live stream, but not realizing that YouTube hadn't put it live yet. So. I did just talk to an empty camera for about 5 straight minutes, but we'll do it again over here for everybody now that they can actually see me. It's going to be a little bit of a shorter episode today. We do have a game scheduled this evening. Don't forget to go give me a follow over on Twitch. I will be live over there playing Harry Dan after this. That is gonna be at 2 p.m. US Eastern, so about 90 minutes from right now is when that game's going down. I've not played Harry Dan in a really long time, and I've not played him in a I have not played him in the Subterranean Assault Detachment yet, so I want to give it a go. We'll see how it goes. I don't know. I'm kind of hoping it's like marginally playable, and I can play it at a GT or something and have it be good, but I don't know. We'll see. It definitely seems less consistent than the cool demon list. But anyway, let's talk about some Warhamster Wednesday stuff, chat. We got some rules questions to talk about. We got some thoughts about the status of competitive 40K, competitive and both competitive, non-competitive 40K. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's hop on in to this discussion. We have some threads to hop in. So there are a couple people, it's going to be a little bit more of like a rules video, I think. There's not like a ton of like crazy drama and stuff. We're mostly just going to be looking through some people's opinions that they have put out. The first one is in the Warhammer Competitive subreddit, talking about basically the state of balance in the game. Aggressive Price 177 has said we're in the final year of another edition. Somehow I'm tired. I think because an issue I think is growing in the game with each new release. Infantry blobs that kill everything. One cool thing about having monsters, gods, vehicles, and infantry. I guess like Catan shards are theoretically like gods. I don't know. Is that kind of rock, paper, scissors game where you need an anti-tank to kill a tank, but nowadays it seems to be the game is full of mega infantry units, Plague Marines, Core Berserkers, Fire Dragons, Victrix, Honor Guard. Interesting. Plague Marines I kind of get, but I think Plague Marines have ended up being not the heavy lifter that we sort of assumed when the Death Guard Codex dropped that they would be. And they're more like a little bit of a board control thing, but their threat range is very limited. They only really do damage within like 6 inches of you, and they're not really slow on the ground. They rely almost entirely on rhinos to get there. So I don't know if Plague Marine bricks are quite the perfect example, but I get what he's saying here, right? Fire Dragons are a good example. They do just kill. They like those are just dedicated anti-tank. Like Fire Dragons are actually mostly trash into non-heavy infantry, and heavy infantry with a vulnerable save they just trade down into a lot of times, so it's like kind of awkward. Victrix Honor Guard definitely feel like a bit of a kill everything unit, but they are only strength 5, right? So it's not like super high toughness, or strength 6 if they have the go turn and the epic hero guy. So it's not like they're not gonna like easily crash through super duper high toughness stuff. Those units usually play a combo with the character, some stratagem, let them lethal, lance, dev wounds, or whatever, plus a ton of attacks. And rerolls basically are able to one-shot everything in the game, no matter toughness value, no matter saves. I don't know if that's true. It doesn't feel right when a big unit of basic Chaos Space Marines run over the table, take away your Primarch and Demigod in one go, and it feels like big guns are a waste when you can kill them just via spam of attacks. Even worse, vehicles, monsters tend to be pretty bad at killing those infantry blobs. So in the end, if infantry mega units kill everything and you need another infantry mega unit to kill the enemy ones, why are you investing in monstrous vehicles? Does anybody notice the same issue, or is it just my impression? So there's a couple interesting discussion sort of threads like this, and I do think we getting to basically the penultimate format of the edition. We're getting very close to the end. We're not quite there, but we're almost at the end state. We're probably 1 or 2 more balanced slates in, and you can definitely feel the power progression, right, of the game. However, I just know this guy got downvoted. However, it does feel to me like the same is true on both ends, right? Where you're like, on one end, the big infantry blobs are really good. And I think the fact that they combo with attached characters in a way that non-infantry units can, or like multi-model units can, does give them that additional level of synergy over a standard vehicle or something like that. But one thing I do really like about 10th edition and the previous editions moving up to it, right? So ever since 7th, the game has essentially treated a big brick of infantry and a big vehicle very similarly. Now, infantry tends to be more mechanically useful in 40K for a bunch of reasons. They can go through walls. That's a big one. So they're more maneuverable than vehicles when it comes to line of sight blocking terrain. And that could be fixed with different terrain rules, to be fair. But they also have they're multi-model, so individual attacks it limits the amount of damage individual attacks can deal, right? So if you have a unit that has a similar level of resilience to a vehicle, they're going to be like slightly harder to kill because there's no spillover damage from large, like a railgun shooting. A Victrix unit's going to kill one Victrix rather than 2/3 of a Land Raider, for example, right? However, it does feel to me like there are examples on both ends of the spectrum, and the game being like both character focused and generally just having more powerful infantry units does feel, I think you're just going to naturally see that there are more big infantry like Death Stars if that's what you're focusing on specifically. But I don't know if I necessarily agree with the narrative that, oh, big things are a waste because little things are good. Maybe I'm biased because I play all greater demons, but the big things are still good. So I don't know if I necessarily agree. I do think I understand the criticism of the game that there is this progression of damage output. Personally, and I've made my stance clear on this in the past, I like it when you can attack enemy models and they die. I don't like it when the game comes down to rolling a bunch of dice and your opponent doesn't respond at all. Nothing happens. I do like it when the game is interesting and lethal. You have to respect your opponent's threat ranges and they have to respect your threat ranges, and then it becomes an interesting maneuvering game. So being able to wombo combo out damage onto things, I think is perfectly fine. But I do understand that there is a gear check when a big unit of Space Marines runs over and blows up your Land Raider, and you feel like that shouldn't be possible. As a Tyranid player, I don't know what damage is. The guy's never played with Doomsday Arcs. Yeah, that's. I was thinking we were talking about Max Burlov's Starshatter Arsenal yesterday, and I was like, well, there is a big Wraith unit in that, which is basically like, I mean, the Wraith unit in Necrons is a big, is a Death Star unit, right? Cryptothralls plus Reanimator's basically part of it. Cryptothralls, Wraiths, Technomancer, you stick them all together, you get the Reanimator there. There's an enhancement involved usually, and then there's usually stratagems involved, right? In that case, it's Endless Servitor to regenerate into fight phase. But and then you can also reactive move them. It's a whole thing. You're just concentrating all your buffs into one unit. However, they're not really the threat in that list. The threat is the Silent King and the 3 Doomsday Arcs standing behind it. They're like a distraction carnifex for the vehicles who are killing you. So I think this feels like I think something that's gonna happen over the next get ready for it for the next week or two, where there's this focus on probably this unit, right? The current boogeyman of the game is the Victrix Honor Guard brick, because it is highly competitive to play 12 to 18 of them in big units with attached characters and wombo combos out the wazoo. But I think that unit is fairly unique in how well rounded it is, right? It can be fast. You have reactive moves. You have blood surges. You have advanced and charge, easy access to advance and charge. It's okay at shooting. It's not good, but it's okay. And it's good in melee. has high volume of attacks. The attacks can be comboed out to be effective, so it's good into, it can be useful in both anti-armor and anti-infantry role. So it's like incredibly well-rounded, and it's very efficient, and it's a big Death Star. However, I don't know if that's necessarily available to most factions, right? Most factions of the game aren't going to do that. You look at, Eldar, I think, are very infantry focused, but that's kind of how Eldar have always been outside of like MSU kind of vehicle builds. And then you look at some of the other big stuff in the game. If you look at other varieties of Space Marines that aren't necessarily spamming Victrix Honor Guard, a lot of them revolve around Redemptors and Storm Ravens right now, and Vindicators. So big, silly tanks, right? Chaos Space Marines are pushing more and more towards, big, silly tank builds where you're taking a bunch of like Forge Fiends and stuff like that. We just talked about Necrons. Necrons almost always are taking Silent King, some number of some combination of Silent King and Catan Shards currently, plus their big bricks. So I think I honestly think the game's in a fairly reasonable spot when it comes to the balance between infantry and big monsters and stuff. Had Hormagaunts stickle a stomp to death, lethal hits. Were they the strength 26, damage 30, AP 10 Hormagaunts or whatever? A lot of those infantry units are fairly easy to kill. Or like Deathwing Knights are slow and screenable. I don't even know if I would call Deathwing Knights a particular like Death Star though. Deathwing Knights are just 5 Terminators, right? And you can attach a character to them, but then it's only ever 6 guys. And when you start talking about the list where it's like multiple units of Deathwing Terminators all working together with the Lion, right? Where it's all this big thing, this big single entity that acts as a unit. I understand that. But in the comparison to like a Victrix Honor Guard that is much larger model count, I don't know if that's necessarily, it's a perfect comparison. But the other thing too is that Deathwing Knights are incredibly slow. You can give them advance and charge, to be fair, but they're not super fast. If their whole game plan is just moving 5 inches a turn, that's not going to be quite as exciting. I also think it's interesting too that like this kind of discussion happens almost regardless of the metagame in one way or another, right? If vehicles are good, one player is going to make this thread and say, I don't like that I can't play my Victrix Honor Guard because they get killed by Land Raiders. And then if Victrix Honor Guard, if big infantry bricks are too good, they say, I don't like I can't play my big vehicles. It's very funny. Keep your demigod away from reach on the shelf. Get wrecked, Fulgrim. Would I classify 10 Wolfguard servers as R-Jack at Death Star? I think I would. I think once you're beyond like 5 models of the character, right? I think that you're big. You're a big unit. I would even potentially consider like 6 Devastators Chariots to be kind of a Death Star. Any like big unit, like max sized unit that your part of your game plan is to pump resources into, right? And I think that is probably the most reasonable definition. But one thing cool that 10th edition has done is that it very rarely rewards actual Death Starring, right? So in Emperor's Shield, we're playing like the double Terminator, the double character Terminator unit, like 10 Assault Terminators, Ancient and Captain. That's a Death Star. And honestly, like that's probably one of the best examples in the game. Consider like Marni's Calgar, Victrix Honor Guard, both Epic Heroes, and Kato Sicarius. Like, yeah, all right. Once we're all in there. But a lot of times those units are no more than 400 points. Only 20% of your army. And when we're comparing to combos in past editions that have been worth like 1,000, 10th edition is actually very antithetical to Death Stars. And a lot of times what happens is that you'll see in the top tables, this player will take a big unit that's incredible, right? It cannot be defeated by your opponent's army. And they just kill literally everything else in the army. And they say, I'm going to hold 3 objectives and I'm going to score max on secondaries. And your Death Star doesn't do that much. So I think the mission design and a lot of the play design has done a good job in actually reducing the power level of those big units. Now where things get weird is when you have like an individual unit that is spammed a bunch of times, right? Deathwing Knights are a good example of that, and also potentially Victrix Honor Guard. But I think it's more of a data sheet balance thing, right? Rather than necessarily like a trend of the game design. Canoptek Race would be kind of a Death Star, yeah. Or they're sort of a survivability star, I guess. They're like a tank. they don't do that much damage. Like I'm not gonna say that. I think does Canoptic Racer are a big unit that is gonna kill your opponent's whole army, but you're pumping a lot of work into them to keep them alive. So they're kind of like a bulwark, I guess, would be a better way to put it. Want to use your higher but 800 points is not worth it. Yeah, I mean, in fairness, like the big, I think a lot of the big stuff, Games Workshop is understandably reticent to make like super heavies good outside knights, right? And I get that because it tends to skew the game in a big way if they become super powerful. And I think that's fine. Like if the people who want to play a Hierophant are going to play a Hierophant or a Warlord, a Warhound Titan, or a Wraith Knight or all this stuff. But I think that they've done a lot to scale the power level of that back, at least since the early parts of the edition. And just been like, this is fine. Tesgrin over here with a flat refusal, a flat disagreement. Nah, he says. Vehicles get better weapons on top of durability buffs. The edition has loads of vehicle spam lists that perform well. There are plenty of vehicles that have great firepower versus infantry. Redeemers or Brawl Predators. Brawl Predators, I guess, are okay. But a Brawl Predator is like, it's a little guy. He's just a little guy. Land Raider Redeemer, phenomenal against infantry for sure. I wonder, too, if like a lot of these like mass 2 damage like it's relatively high AP, right? A Redeemer's AP2 ignore cover, so it's basically AP3, and it has you can give it like Storm of Fire, or whatever, get it to AP4 or get it to AP3 ignore cover. I do wonder if a lot of those 2 to 4 damage high volume attacks are going to start coming back in to deal with these like Victrix Honor Guard units. With somebody made the comment the other day that like Tower actually maybe potentially looking pretty good right now because a Riptide kills like 2 to 3 Victrix in one shot, pretty not unreliably. I was like, that's actually great. That's a great call. You go into Auxiliary Cadre, you're shooting like whatever it is, AP3 ignore cover with devastating with 4 damage, it just flat kills a guy. Seems like it could be good. Despoiler with twin Gatling cannons, a great example. A Gorkanaut, maybe a little hyperbole over here. I don't know about it. A Gorkanaut. I mean, a Gorkanaut's it's okay. I don't know if I would put it at the top end though. Pulsar Executioner shoots 30 shots, lots of 2 damage. Yeah, and I think there are good examples of good vehicles that are going to be strong. And Pure Dealer over here with, I think, a fairly reasonable take. I was listening to Hell's Reach and they mentioned a Space Marine killed 4 to 5 Orc tanks, so it's pretty lore accurate. That's the other thing I think it's worth putting front and center as well, is that the infantry, and I sort of mentioned this earlier, that like if you look at the grand spectrum of 40k, there's going to be more if you assume that a similar proportion of all unit types are going to be viable, there's always going to be more infantry that are viable than any other unit type because they're the most numerous, right? And that is not only just math, but it's also in some ways by design, because the game is infantry focused. Like the lore doesn't necessarily, obviously there are counterexamples to this, but like 90% of 40k lore focuses on an individual Space Marine doing a cool thing. Of course, that dude's unit of Space Marines is going to get the most, the most design time. It's going to be the forefront of the game, and it's going to be where all of the, and not necessarily Space Marines. This isn't an anti-Space Marine rant, but I mean like characters, character attachments, units, unit champions, all that stuff is where a lot of the focus of the background, the justification of the game is. And so I think naturally it's just gonna be that a lot of that stuff gets favored a little bit more heavily than vehicle stuff. Not to say that vehicles are not good, but I think that there's a justifiable and greater percentage of them of infantry that are gonna be solid. Don't got a Harridan, but you want one? They are really cool. I will say my poor Harry Dan's broken like 20 times because that model is like really, really big. It's really easy to knock over, bro. I have to fix my Harry Dan before he goes back to a table because he's got little chips and bits broken everywhere. Poor guy. Need more 3P novels about the little engine that could. Yeah, like all the is there? I guess I'm not a lore person, so I don't know what all the novels are like. But I feel like a novel, a Fury, but in 40K would actually be sick. I don't know if there is one about that. Give us a book about a tank crew, a Rogel Dorn crew. Would be kind of neat. Ancient Den over here. I understand the point, but it's funny to hear about vehicles that are performing when night meta barely ended. So yeah, I don't mean to throw shade here to the OP. I think it's an interesting topic for discussion, but I do think that vehicles are certainly viable. And I think that I think that there are very specific examples. Fire Dragons are a good example. Eradicators back in the day used to be another good example, where it's like a unit that is very pointedly designed to destroy vehicles, and to the point that they make vehicles very difficult to play against in that matchup. However, most other matchups they don't necessarily have, which also, to be fair, is actually beneficial in aggressive prices mind, because a Fire Dragon unit is dedicated anti-tank. Like I said before, Fire Dragons are kind of inconsistent outside of Fuegan and the one turn where Fuegan like goes 5 up criticals and then sustained a bunch of times, right? That's like a separate thing. But he's sort of pulling all of the work for the rest of the unit. A Fire Dragon unit isn't going to kill everything. They might burn all of their aspect tokens to make Fuegan kill an infantry squad, but they won't do it consistently, and they probably won't do it a second time. They get one of those. So yeah, I don't know. I thought it was interesting. Anyway, Chance. Let's continue on this trend. We'll talk momentarily about these Reddit usernames are incredible, chat. Joe's Great Pea Drinker, who I'm sure is going to have the most salient points ever, who talks about going second. I find it interesting that I think that this has been sort of the understood reality basically since like Pariah Nexus, right? Where everyone's just like going second is cracked and it's amazing. And part of your list design has to be finding ways to do things going first. And if you can design a list that is effectively good at going first, then you're going to give yourself a better chance. But it ends up being the onus is essentially on the players to make going first better. Because if you just show up with no game plan, the player going second is advantaged. Not to say that you cannot win going first. It's obviously clearly not the case. Richard Sigler is the world champion because he won going first in a bad mission for the person going first. But you have to specifically build your list for it. So I find it's interesting. I guess not everyone necessarily may have come to this conclusion at the same time, but I find it interesting that this thread's coming up now at this late stage in the edition. Going first seems better every way, says Joe's Great Pea Drinker. The opponent moves first, which means you're more likely to be able to shoot things and know what your opponent's general plan is before they know yours. Then you also score at the end of your turn on the 5th. That is so strong. My win rate is 70% when I go second, 61% when I go first. Am I missing something? When I was tracking my win rate in tabletop battles last year, I think. I ended up stopping doing this because I used to do it back in the day when I was trying to train War Machine competitively. I would keep track of all my games, all my competitive games, all my tournament games. I would keep track of. I found I ended up getting very toxic because I used to tie a lot of my I used to tie a lot of whatever to a win rate, and so I would try to angle for wins, and I didn't like the general mindset I put me in, but I did for a little while because tabletop battles naturally tracks your win rates. I noticed at one point I was playing RTTs every week, so I was probably 30 or 40 IRL games, non-TTS IRL games in with demons, and my go second win rate was 100. I had won every game I went second in, which was funny. So I think that's it's in a lot of cases that's probably a similar, people are having similar experience. Ignoble Kings is going first does have its advantages. You decide the tempo of the game and have threats going early on. Melee armies love to go first. They stage and threaten charges on turn 2. Anyway, you might have a preference. That's totally fine. Yeah, I think that's also the same for me. I tend to be a very passive player. I tend to play very defensively. So personally, I think going second is much better for me. Going second is a bit more advantageous. It's more thanks to the mission favoring the second player than actual gameplay. It also depends on your matchup as well. It sounds like if Joe's Great Pea Drinker is playing something that has a lot of reactive effects or uppy downies, going second is incredibly strong, right? If you can redeploy going second, it's very good. However, if you have a lot of early game threats, so you're fast and you're able to maneuver, you have scouts and forward operators, so like Tau to some extent, right? To a lesser extent, maybe World Eaters, stuff that can push to the midboard early and then immediately engage you. Or I would say I think that you can set up, with some aggressive armies that even might not necessarily, on the paper be wanting to go second, where you're playing like Raven Guard or something, which typically tends to delight going second because it can react to what your opponent's doing. But going first means it gets the first drop on Devastator Centurions, which is big. And then also it can basically stage a Vanguard Veteran unit, then bottom one Rapid Ingress of Vanguard Veteran unit and hit them with 2 at the same time, plus the Devastator's Chariots. And some armies literally immediately fold to that. So again, I think a lot of it's having play for turn 1. And I do like the lists that include very specifically things to do turn 1. Wraithlord says, my Blood Angels prefer going first. Then I have multiple scary melee units that can stage up the midboard with little fear of getting shot. If they get countercharged, you can drop Sanguinor on the biggest threat. This is an interesting one, too. When I was playing Space Marines, so at the start of the year, I played Space Marines for a little while because they were super broken. And I noticed that Blood Angels and other jump pack, like melee aggressors, going second into that army was fucking brutal. Because sometimes if you are playing an army that tends to do well going second, the first player, if they're playing this very aggressive melee style, can just threat saturate you into oblivion. They'll basically just set up 3 to 4 turns of consecutive charges into your front line to the point that you cannot push primary because you'll immediately lose all that stuff. And you don't have you lose the activation count to deal with it efficiently, which I think is interesting. Still new to the game. When you say you have little fear of being shot, do you mean because you stage them behind terrain or because your unit's not shooting? Yeah, because you hide the units, of course. Anything in the game will die by focus fire. He meant he hides the units. Ku says not focus fire. 1 unit seems to kill almost any of mine. We're just playing Eldar. We're just playing Deathwatch. Oh, I only play against my friend who plays Deathwatch. Oh, okay. that does make sense. The Deathwatch bricks are killing my units. Well, that's because they're 10-man heavy intercessor squads. Those Deathwatch bricks are also probably 4 times the cost of whatever they killed. So that's not the end of the world. Black Fusion says, I agree. To counter this, I build first turn threats in my list. So if I go first, I can set the tempo, kill something, and roadblock, so I can have some primary and material advance. Sisters, it was Melted Dominions, now Sanctifiers. Yeah. So and Sisters are a great example of that because you do have that turn 1 threat that's so dangerous. And going second, they can respond to turn 1 threats, or they can just simply stage for secondaries early. I wonder, it's probably worth a video, right? Winning going second is probably worth a video. We'll probably or winning going first, excuse me, is probably almost certainly worth the discussion about. Necrogoblin got a 1,000 point game coming up. 3 to 4 player free for all. I don't know if I can necessarily give you advice on winning a 4-player free for all. I'm gonna level chat. I don't know if I have what it takes over there. Joe's great. OP has come back. He said, my problem might be that both my armies play extremely slow. I can't make any real plays turn 1. I play Death Guard and Necrons. Both have fast units, but it isn't anything crazy. So Necrons can do a couple of things. I think it's a little bit of an underplayed unit. They've been overshadowed by some other utility options, but Tomb Blades are I don't know where those guys have gone. The other thing too is that Necrons, you start to get, you have redeployment options if you're playing like Awakened Dynasty, and you can threaten your opponent with those really early, right? Because you can redeploy with Veil of Darkness, pop of 1. So you can just like have this threat. If you play like the Veil of Darkness Chronomancer unit, you can have this threat that can literally just take a piece from your opponent and then hide itself on turn 1 and be in a relatively reasonable place. The other thing too that Necrons tend to do is they force the engagement by simply taking primary and then preventing your opponent from, like, forcing your opponent to engage with them. I think I would be interested to see if like Canoptek Wraith builds do it feels to me like those do have a pretty strong turn 1, simply because you can put the race in the middle objective, top of the first turn, and just say engage or I'm going to score a 15. You're not, unless I, literally there's no terrain, I can create a situation where you can't get all your attacks into me. It's unlikely you kill them because I'm a Canoptek Wraith unit and it's early. You don't have that many command points for stratagems and stuff. And you're probably not in a position to like hit it with too many things. So I'm going to tote one Canoptek Wraith in the middle and force you to push units out into the center to take them. And I just mostly get them for free. I do feel like Necrons can do stuff. Death Guard, I understand. But Death Guard also have like infiltrating Poxwalkers that can obsec turn 1. I don't know. There's definitely some plays you can have turn 1. You can stage up all your stuff, set up screens plenty fast with Silent King plus 2 movement aura. Death Guard have fast vehicles, infiltrating Poxwalkers. Death Guard do feel like they could be in a little bit of a tough spot. But Death Guard, that also means that Death Guard, if you're going first, they get first opportunity to drop Deshroud Terminators. So if they can stage Poxwalkers midboard, they can threaten the Deshroud Terminator drop on anything that's like up to the point of your opponent's deployment zone pretty safely. So your opponent does have to like push forward to screen that or hide back. I'm going to be trying 2 Triarch Stalkers and Star Shatter here in a couple weeks. So what I can do round 1 with those heat rays. Get the 8-inch scout, 8-inch move turn 1. Star Shatter gives you assault. You advance and shoot. Yeah. Now, honestly, the Triarch Stalkers is another great example of a powerful scouting unit. It used to be the thing at Tomb Blades used to just literally movement block your opponent turn 1 because you would just advance, shoot, scoot, and you would just like tow their deployment zone. You'd scout, advance forward, shoot, move again, and stand in front of their vehicles so they can't go anywhere. So you would put Wraiths in the middle and then just wall off between all their ruins on top 1 with Tomb Blades and just say, "Your go." And then you would basically be forced to like wildly overcommit into these annoying Tomb Blades, or you would just immediately give up 15 on primary. And as soon as, if the first player doesn't have to give up too many pieces and overscores primary top of battle round 2, they've basically immediately removed all benefit the second player gains from bottom 5 scoring, right? So yeah. Then the game equalizes, which is, I think, the idea of what the first player is supposed to do, right? That's like the intended play pattern. Is first player gets the first opportunity to like fortify the center objective and either take material from the second player or they equalize scoring if the second player chooses not to engage. And then the first player is just like, that's fine with them. They can either remain there or they can pull back and force the second player in to come back and gain the advantage again. Like Reavers can do that. I guess if you're playing real space, but Reavers don't have a shoot and skew, right? Reavers do just move faster on the beginning, so I guess that it does make sense. Used to run Beastmasters, now Drukhari barely has a first turn threat. That is unfortunate for Drukhari for sure. Can somebody explain how Melted Dominions or Sanctifiers can threat first turn? Well, you move, and then you move again, and then you disembark, and then you shoot them. Outside of Bringers of Flame, they threaten 21 plus their weapon range, so 27, right? Inside Bringers of Flame, they threaten like 33. It's pretty wild. 33 is the movement value, right? You move 6. No. 24 plus disembark. 27 inches, excuse me. That's a long way. That's a long way, chat. 27 plus if you consider Melta range, these are at 33. 2 Melta. Look at him go. Look at him go, chat. So that's an interesting question. I do think that's the game requests that, or the way the game is designed. Second player, if you are of similar skill level, and the second player will win. Like in balanced lists with the same skill level, second player will win the majority of the time. However, once you start skewing for first, I think it actually equalizes quite a bit. So you just have to have a game plan to work around it. Play forward operators, play scouts. Scouts feel so good going first, by the way. If you want to, like, oh man, I wish I had a good turn 1. Just play a bunch of scouting units. It feels amazing. You're like, suddenly my options on turn 1 are incredible. I have like so much more room to maneuver my stuff around. I could just move a block or get secondaries way more easily. Just playing units with scouts, which feels much better going first. So anyway. Let's talk about the Busting Champions race for sure. Yeah. Should we start taking note of army win rates versus second? I think most of the things do that. I know that Goonhammer does, I believe. Take a peek at stats real quick. I think a lot of I love looking at the tabletop battle statistics because some of it's like incomprehensible. Where's the stats thing at? Do they still support that? Oh, sorry. I was like, where is it? It's literally the first link on the page. There we go. Win rate. Go first win rate. So, but it's by deployment. Can we see it by... I'm getting some spicy ads. Jesus. Okay. Win rate and points by faction. Do they have a go first win rate? Oh, they don't. Oh, chat. I thought they did. Dang. All right. Well, it is what it is. What according to Tabletop Battles is the best army in the game? Chaos Demons. Let's go. Let's go. Understandable. Did you look at the thread I linked? It was like just a rules question about Miracle Dice, right? I have an attacks video that I keep talking about because I have it recorded and I spent a lot of time on it, but I'm like so reticent because I know it's a video that's just gonna make people angry. There was a period of time. I mean, it happens every once in a while where like I'll release rules content and then I'll get like endless amounts of hate. And then I'll just be like, I'm never doing this again. I hate this. It's very demoralizing sometimes to talk about the actual way the rules work. Oh, poor Imperial agents. Almost as bad as Chaos Space Marines. Sag. This is wild. Space Marines at 45%. But that's because 1 million people play them. They're literally twice the representation of almost any of these other factions. That's crazy, though. 45%. Insane. Insane. Goonhammer has go, but yeah, do they go first per army though? Because they have go first per mission. I don't know if they do it per army. If they do, I can't find it. Yeah, I don't know. That would be interesting. Does stat check? No. According to stat check, Adeptus Sororitas best faction. Chaos Demon top 4 though, so that tracks. What Ultra Spurs will be? Yeah. Stat check's out of date. Oh. Yeah, it's shows how long it's been since I looked at stats. Oh yeah, it's up through Drukhari release. That's not that out of date, right? The only update has been like the Victrix stuff since then, but it doesn't include more recent events. Yeah, fair enough. All right, that's fine. So the weird thing about talking about stats for a sec here. Unfortunately, none of the stats. I think Stat Check is probably the most accurate, if I had to guess. But this is tabletop. This, to my knowledge, the Goonhammer stats use Tabletop Battles app, which means that, I guess it depends on what you mean by accuracy, but this basically utilizes stats, to my knowledge, regardless of game size and in non-competitive formats. So this could be including stats from like Crusade games and like random league games and pickups and escalation stuff. I believe that that's how it works. Yeah. Oh yeah. So you can. No, that's BP. So it while StatCheck pulls scores from only competitive events, this pulls it from everywhere, right? So you get a lot of like people playing their first games and stuff. And to some extent, like that is like real data, but I don't know if we're trying to analyze things in the most competitive way. I don't know necessarily if it's the most accurate way to do it. Anyway, chat. Let's talk about some other stuff. Should we talk about WYSIWYG? Oh, there's an interesting question here, actually. I have one more question. We can talk. It's momentarily kind of rules oriented. It's rules adjacent, I guess. About chess clocks. It was just a rules question somebody had. It's not like it's not a huge discussion forum. Mr. What's It To Ya posted, my chess clock expired. Could I have fought? And my opponent insisted on using a chess clock. I kind of shrugged at it. It's turn 4, made 4 different charges. My time expires. My opponent says that's it. I can't do anything else. I can't resolve my combats. Is that actually the case? It was a close game. The combats would have altered the outcome. So here's the problem I have with chess with clock rules. Every time somebody asks me a clock rule in an event, right? If I'm a judge or whatever, or if I'm a table judge for Top Table, a lot of times I can't answer the question. And the reason for that is because a lot of events assume knowledge of chess clocks, but don't necessarily spell them out. And in addition to that, a lot of events aren't explicit about what their chess clock rules are, or they all use different chess clock rules. So part of the tough thing with playing chess clocks and so in for clarity, this is a perfectly reasonable question because it depends entirely on the event. So like the first answer here is if your chess clock time has expired, you cannot do anything other than roll saves. Immediately the response is, well, that depends on the tournament. Some tournaments say you must do everything that is mandatory, even with no time. Fighting is mandatory. I believe that was the rule in 8th edition, was that you had to make mandatory attacks, but you couldn't do anything voluntary. So like piling and consolidating, doing anything like that, you could not do. But it was a weird rule. It was like a kind of a bizarre mess, if I remember correctly. And then Sir Biscuit over here, I think, points out basically the heart of the issue. There isn't a universal set of chess clock rules. So in the olden days of, I don't know, 4 years ago, I think that a lot of times you were required to fight if your chess clock was expired. However, more recently, I think they have mandated that you cannot, or they've ruled that you cannot do that. The most common set of chess clock rules is the Frontline Gaming one. They're basically the only circuit that is widely used that has like a set of chess clock rules. I don't know if like UKTC does, actually. Should look that up. But it's another instance where I'm gonna see if I can find it see if we can find a UKTC one. What would that be? Procedures? Almost certainly, right? There's a section on chess clocks. We've done it, chat. We found a way. Life found a way. Chess clocks are mandatory for any player to make the final round of an event. If you if you think you will make the top cut after the rounds in which everyone plays, you must play against the chess clock. Okay. If you think you will make top cut, you have to play a chess clock. What? That doesn't matter. Who cares? Usually, I think a judge will just tell you. After the rounds in which everyone plays, after the open round. So, if you did not play a chess clock during the event, are you ineligible to make top cut? That's a very interesting rule. I cannot imagine that that's enforced. In all other instances, chess clock should be used unless both players agree not to use one. It should be noted that the clock should be passed to the alternate player when they have priority to roll dice or in any way delaying the progress of the game while making decisions. Players should be consistent throughout the game where the chess clock can be passed to them for split activations or remain on the active player's time. Switching approach that way through a match is viewed as a sportsmanship infringement. Players who are on top cut or stream are required to cleanly and verbally agree at the approach at the start of the game. When a player passes the clock to their opponent for split activations, they're responsible for sharing. So under these rules, would you be able to fight back when your clock has run out? Only a referee may pause the chess clock. Players found doing so will receive a warning. This is so that the event doesn't run over time, by the way. Sometimes you have players who, like, every time they have a question about something, they'll pause the chess clock, and then their game lasts 30 minutes extra past the round time. It's a real problem. If your chess clock runs out of time, there's still time remaining in the round. You started your game early. Chess clocks read 0-0 with 10 minutes remaining. You should split the remaining time evenly between the players. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Huh. Cool. What happens when you're out of time, though? Wait. What does happen when you're out of time? Players are responsible for finishing their turns within the portion of time available to them. When one player is short or running low on time, it is expected that they play in such a way that they can finish their turn 5. This may require short turns with limited activations. In the above scenario, where one player has more time remaining, it is not expected that they split this time with their opponent. Of course not. What would even be the point of the chess clock? Instead, they should use it to ensure they can finish all of their own turns. So it's like a suggestion? Am I crazy? This doesn't tell you what you can do when you're out of time. You just run out of time. No more 40K forever. You're banned. You have to sell your army. That's wild. Wait, I don't understand. That's crazy. Death. They take you out back. What? Okay. I am confused. Oh, timekeeping. There's a section. Is this good? Does this have it? Each round of tournament consists of a game in which 5 battle rounds should be played. If a game is not played to completion, that's considered slow play. Okay. Wild. Oh, okay. So I think we are we are coming to the heart of the problem here. Because, this is not a codified rule in the core rulebook. And this is probably one of, if not the biggest TOC to have chess clock rules, and it doesn't tell you how it works. Let's find. So, Frontline Gaming has their own chess clock rules. I'm gonna see if I can find them, which I think is kind of the code that is utilized in most cases. And the old ITC rules were the ones that were used most often, but I don't know if they're necessarily like that up to date nowadays. So these are the old ones. This is from 2018. So this may not be perfectly up to date here. But I know that a lot of people reference back to these rules, and so oftentimes when you're talking about chess clock rules in 40K, they're referring to the ITC ones. So I guess they update this at some point. I don't know if they have like a change log or anything. No. All right. When does time start? Let's see. These are optional to use. You're not required to use chess clocks. Work in progress. Time starts when the first pregame action or dice roll happens. So when you're, I assume that means like pregame action. I don't know what that means. So it start of first battle round, so it doesn't deploy. Games end naturally depending on random game length rolls. Oh, so you can tell this is old. Start of a new game. Start of a new game turn, a round, I guess, battle round, when neither player has greater than 10 minutes left of time on the clock. So if everyone's below 10, you do not start a new round. So in this case, there's two separate limitations, right? When you're out of time, you get a penalty, and then if the total game is taking too long, it may actually be forced to end early. And that does sort of help ramp up the game at the end. At the end of the allotted total time. I don't think this is used that much anymore. Each player is responsible for their own time. It's the player's right, but not their obligation to make sure their time is handled properly. I think this is an important clause for chess clocks because it should not be, if you pass the time to your opponent, right, for saves or whatever, like they're going to Overwatch or something, and they don't pass it back to you, it should not be your fault. There can certainly be times where you're weaponizing this, where like you don't tell your opponent you're passing time. I think it can be, especially for IRL play. TDS is a little different because the chess clock's actually just like literally in front of your face. But for IRL play, I think it's probably reasonable to require that the passing of a chess clock requires notification to your opponent. And then if they forget to pass it back, I don't think that should not be on the person who passed it to them. In the assault phase, it's fight phase now. A player may choose to forego rolling to determine the results of a combat. So you can talk out game results. Any major rule disputes result in a pause time scenario. The time is to remain paused until a formal judge calls at the table. So they allow for pausing for judge calls specifically, but I guess not other stuff. If a player's time runs out, they may not perform actions except for the ones listed below. The only exception is if they're in the middle of moving a unit, they may finish so that the unit is placed legally on the board. So you can't end out of coherency, for example, and like create an illegal board state. Any other action is immediately stopped. If a player runs out of time, they only perform the following actions: make saving throws, taking leadership tasks, scoring objectives they've already achieved or already hold. And this is pretty classic. I think most chess clock systems probably have these in place. So you cannot attack at all. And in fact, if you clock mid-activation, this is different than the chess clock rules that I have for my events, even. If you end mid-activation, you just stop in the middle of your attack and you just pass. Your attack essentially doesn't do anything, which is pretty wild. You can't even finish that activation. Some examples are as follows. You put 20 wounds on a unit containing models of different saving throws. Pass the clock to your opponent so you can make saving throws in the order he chooses. Your opponent must make 3 leadership tasks. Pass the clock to your opponent while he makes the tests and adjust the units would fail, because they used to run away when they failed leadership back in the day, so they would move. You destroy a vehicle, your opponent has a large squad inside and wants to be positioned. Pass the clock to them when they arrange models. Yeah, that's pretty reasonable. So these are the chess clock rules that I've seen most often. But the heart of the matter is that Warhammer now has a tournament packet, right? An official set of tournament rules that governs everything from pairings to placing to, like, you know, to some extent prize support. Because they have OPKs now. I don't know. They're not that great, but they do exist, if I remember correctly. You can buy from Games Workshop, like a tournament pack that the TO can give out. But it has no chess clock rules. It has no timing rules basically at all. And I think part of it's that Games Workshop themselves do not like chess clocks, but the community has come around to the fact that I think chess clocks are basically the only way to resolve games of 40K in a fair manner. And I think that it should be an effort should be made to include chess clock rules into the game, the tournament rules as a whole. I think it's embarrassing to me that they don't have them, and that they rely on things like the open source chess clock rules from Frontline Gaming in order to do that. In a universe where we have like an official tournament booklet and it doesn't have any rules for that you can easily point to. And then you create situations like this where your opponent's like, you're like, can I fight? I don't know. Depends on what the tournament says, but that depends on the tournament, and that requires that you read the tournament packet beforehand. And you internalize 100% of what you can do when you're chess clocked. It's a whole thing. A lot of UK DSC events that tell players to roll only saves when they have less than 5 minutes. Wow. Okay, that's wild. 5 minutes left, you can't make an attack? Crazy. But that's also like not what the rules say. I don't know. I like the TO can make up their own rules, I guess, in their packet, but it should be explained beforehand, right? So that you know what to do here. It's just unfortunate to not have a concrete answer to that. All right, we're running a little low on time because we did start late. So let's talk about WYSIWYG. Let's talk about model assembly and using old miniatures. Because I think this is a very interesting question. Hopeful Marketing asks, move this over so we can read. About models that can be used in tournaments. I want to get in competitive Warhammer. My plan is to pick up some Vanguard veterans. My concern is that I worry about buying them now, only to have new models come out in 11th edition, and I won't be able to use the old models in tournaments, meaning I'll just have thrown money away. I may not be able to find anything related to model eligibility in tournaments. I want some input from people in the community. I'm going to buy them. Worry they'll be going to Legends. We actually have had this conversation on the live stream in the past about old miniatures being used as new ones. I think generally speaking, especially for something like a Vanguard veteran, I don't think any event would have an issue with that, right? As long as the war gear is similar and the model is representing what it is, a Space Marine with a jump pack. Generally speaking, I think they're pretty open. In fact, the reason that this is like fresh in my mind is that while I was going around armies at Standoff this past weekend where I was live streaming, I noticed a bunch of old metal Victrix Honor Guard. You know how many old metal Victrix Honor Guard I found, chat? It was a large number. It was a shockingly large number. And for reference, could get a picture of them. They're actually cool. They're really cool models. I really like the OG Victrix. They're sort of classics. Let me find the old version. Here we go. I mean, it's basically the new ones are essentially a resculpt of these guys. Look at that unit though, chat. That is a good looking Space Marine right there. And I saw a lot of these guys hanging around. And when you consider, obviously they were on 40 mil bases, right? They were rebased to be the correct size. When you consider that the unit, the Victrix Honor Guard then versus now is so similar. It's almost identical. You got the champion, you got the banner bearer guy, and then you got a bunch of guys with power weapons and bolt guns. It's exactly the same unit. It's just a scale difference. And I think in cases like that, using old models seems perfectly acceptable. And I know that there's a lot of fear about Firstborn Space Marines and whether or not in new editions they will be playable. And I think Firstborn Space Marine Infantry, if they do end up going the way of the Dodo or becoming legended or getting rolled into a single data sheet or something, I do think that we will be inundated by these questions. And in my opinion, the answer should always be use them as the Primaris equivalent. It would be unfortunate in my eyes if people who have old legacy miniatures are told that they cannot use them at all in the newest edition because they're just not a unit in the game anymore. Especially because one of the selling points of miniatures is that they never go out of date, right? A miniature will be yours forever. And literally, I think if you go to a Warhammer store, it's like part of their sales pitch that they're like, oh, unlike a card game where you get, the format rotates and things go out of season and you can't play them anymore. A miniature doesn't do that. You can always play the miniature. And if that ends up not being the case in the future, I think that would be unfortunate. And I think that would be a bit of a violation of what miniature gaming is. And I think you should always be able to use your Vanguard veterans as jump pack assault intercessors. If the Vanguard veteran unit doesn't exist, I don't think you should use a unit that is already existed in the game as a different unit, right? Obviously, that's like a step too far, especially if they're within the same faction. That's just confusing. However, if Vanguard veterans get legended, but jump back assault intercessors, a slightly larger Vanguard veteran, remains in the game, 100% I think you should be able to use them. And I wouldn't be surprised if Games Workshop put that in their official proxy list. There is an official list of proxies you're allowed to do in 40K, and Vanguard veterans are on it. But the other question, chats, is a really interesting one because Big Owl 2785 asked about WYSIWYG at RTTs. And this thread caught me because I was like, I think it makes sense to me, right? In some cases, you'll require that you use the official miniature, or at the very least, you'll require that you use WYSIWYG. Generally speaking, in miniature games means that either the unit is directly representative of the datasheet you're using it as, or their war gear is perfectly representative, right? So if I have a miniature, it's always going to be either the unit that I'm using, or it's gonna have the exact same weapons, right? I have a rifle and a knife, and so I have a little knife on my guy and a little rifle, and his grenades are on his belt. But Big Owl 2785 said, I was looking at RTTs around me, found there's a big difference between WYSIWYG standards, which shocked me because I assumed it was kind of like a well-known thing between around the community. Is it usual for your area too that RTTs vary widely in what they count as WYSIWYG or how they apply it, the standard, I guess? In my case, one RTT simply doesn't say anything. Great. I wonder if this too is it feels to me that this reads like Big Owl here actually contacted either the event organizers or the stores or whatever, or if it's in their packet, I guess. But I'm not sure. This feels very conversational, which kind of feels like they actually spoke to the TO, but it might just be from their packet. And in fairness, packets are a good indication of what's allowable especially an RTT. Like a GT or a major, they're going to enforce it a lot more. But an RTT, a lot of times you can work with the TO to be acceptable. I think a lot of people put a lot of stake in RTTs, or folks who don't have a ton of experience in the community, where they're they see the word tournament at the end of RTT. It's Rogue, Trader, Tournament. You're like, oh, it's a tournament. That means it's serious business. Well, yeah, yes and no. It should be competitive, and it should be conducted in a competitive way. However, it is all RTTs are generally like a game day with prize support, and I think a TO would be much happier to work with you to get their size of their RTTs, to increase the size of their player base than they will be to enforce a rule that they might have written 2 years ago and are just copy pasting into their BCP event. So I think there's some level of flexibility here in all these cases, I would imagine. However, it is interesting how differently they sort of discuss the issue. And here's some examples. One says, we play with a standardized tournament rule. We play 2,000 points. We play WYSIWYG. Only original GW models, no 3D prints. If models have different weapons, you can play the unit if it's equipped entirely with one weapon. For example, your unit has guns, flamers, and rocket launchers. You can play them all equipped with guns, but you have to inform your opponent so there's no confusion. We focus very much on fair play. So you can essentially say, I didn't take any war gear upgrades on this unit, regardless of what they're carrying. Or you can say, I have, if I have I have a bunch of different weapons, but I want to play them as one special weapon. You can say that. Part of that might be old school stuff, because there used to be units that were like, and I think it's maybe still the case from the new starter sets, although it's less so with the new Primaris releases. But you used to get like tactical marines inside a starter set that had a bunch of different weapons. It was like a flamethrower and a missile launcher guy and a chainsword guy and a bolter guy. And there was no optionality. You couldn't change them at all. They were actually just like one piece locked sculpts. You couldn't do anything with them. And so saying, hey, all your Space Marines have to have perfectly accurate weapons. If you're a new player and you're like, well, in my army, I couldn't afford the flamethrower because they cost points back in the day. But all I have is a flamethrower because I can't physically put a bolter on this guy. I understand that a little bit. But it seems like that's very hardcore, right? Another says, to ensure clarity for your opponents, it should be striven to make it immediately recognizable that what weapons and war gear your models are equipped with. Conversions are allowed. Exceptions can be made in certain cases. They are sanctioned by the TO. Deviating too far from WYSIWYG can lead to a loss of battle-ready victory points. There is no obligation to pay models, but you do not get battle-ready points if you're unpainted primed. If your base, this one gets me. I don't know. Armies with models painted in a different color than the base get 5 victory points. What does that fucking mean? Does that mean the base of the miniature? Or it sounds almost like you have to establish a baseline color scheme for your army, and then everyone has to match that. So if you like borrow models, you lose 5 victory points. That's fucking wild. I don't like this one quite as much, but I think this is a very reasonable policy here, right? If there was enough effort to put models, war gear, special models recognizable for your opponent, you get 10 victory points. Which means there's like what if I don't know, like, I don't know what enough effort means here. There's no just like I get battle ready for painting my army, which is pretty wild. But I guess this is like the assumption is that you have assembled your models correctly, I guess. What if my baseline is different cartels in Drukhari raid? Get fucked. What if I was playing Adeptus Custodes and I wanted my Witch Seekers to be painted differently than my Prosecutors? One has blue cloaks and silver armor, and one has gold armor and red cloaks. Immediately lose 5 victory points. I don't know. I think that this is maybe like a policy to just like sort of try to prevent people from doing borrows and stuff. But that is pretty wild. That's another thing where it's like, I wonder how often that gets enforced. But this is very reasonable, right? It should be striven that your weapons, you should strive to make your weapons recognizable. Conversions are fine. And you can text the TO if you have exceptions. Hey man, I tried to get las cannons for my Devastator squad, but the online bit store order got delayed and all I have is missile launchers. Can I just run all my missile launchers as las cannons? Yeah, that's okay. You're fine. This is like, honestly, this feels like it should be just included in the tournament packet, maybe. Put guns on your guys. You want a guy to have a special gun? Give him a special gun so your opponent can tell which one it is. And then it makes sense. Or a really lax one. Armies do not have to be painted. Models must be built completely and have the base according to the one provided by Games Workshop, or an alternate base fitting the original. Half-built drop pods or jet bikes without bases. I love this. This feels very specific. There was like one guy who was like playing a bunch of jet bikes on the floor. Will not be tolerated and ruined by the TO. That is something that does happen, because jet bikes, like old Eldar jet bikes, did tend to like break off their flight stands all the time. And so sometimes you just play against Eldar armies that were just all jet bikes on the ground. And you're like, how do I How do I measure this? Because you don't have a base, but you're supposed to have a base. That feels wild to me. Of course, you should have a base in your miniatures. The jet bikes one is weird because like you can also just get 32 mil bases and then just sit the jet bike on it. It feels like easy to fix. I don't know. Alternative models, occasional proxies would be allowed. They have to be built to completion, approved by the TO. Entire counts as armies have to have a coherent theme. A big mix of models will not be tolerated. So you can convert your whole army as long as it looks cohesive. I would also probably put a thing in there that it also has to be recognizable. Once explained, different units have to be easily differentiable from each other, but that makes total sense. Violation would be removed from the TO. Also, feels extremely reasonable. I love this. I love that it's specifically drop pods and jet bikes without bases. Those are treated with extreme prejudice. And a seemingly open one. We want to encourage players to use conversions and alternate models on principle. Please clear them with the TO if models differ too much from the original. Non-approved conversions or alternative models can lead to exclusion. Accurate base sizes are an obligation. This one, they talk very specifically about this stuff. New Saturday Dreadnought can be played as a Ballistus. Leviathan Dreadnought can be played as a Brutalis or Custodes Contemptor. I do wonder if this was like a frequently asked question where a lot of people were like, Custodes Contemptor? Isn't the Leviathan Dreadnought like really big? How big is a Leviathan Dreadnought compared to a Contemptor Dreadnought? What's that mini compare website? Does that have those on there? Oh. I found it, but I found the Legion, the Imperialis one. Here you go. Here's a Contemptor. Here's a Leviathan Dreadnought. Go away. And then, what's a Contemptor? Those are very different sizes. I think a Leviathan, what's a Redemptor Dreadnought? I feel like a Leviathan should be a Redemptor. Yeah, they're like the same. Well, they're similar. Leviathan as a Contemptor is wild. Or a Telemon, right? Leviathan and Telemon is like the same size. Ryan G.
Edriong 6,951 donated $5 through Super Chat. Shout out to Away
Telemon's
Games.
actually significantly
they
bigger.
have a very
sorry,
simple
Telemon.
process for approving proxies.
Although I think this is a
great
little
example of commonly used proxies.
Ryan, thank you for the super chats. Shout out to Away Games. We have a very simple process for approving proxies. Spawner, a great example of commonly used proxies. Yeah, Spawner cool too from like a proxying standpoint because how do I scroll this? Oh, it doesn't scroll very well. Because they are like conceptually extremely wide open for what they actually look like. So I feel like putting a Leviathan being like a Ballistus Dreadnought or like just a Redemptor proxy is like feels very reasonable, right? These are basically the same size, almost identically. The Leviathan's like a teeny bit shorter, but a lot of it's because of the Frank Storm launcher on the top. So if you're playing Ballistus Dreadnought, they actually look like about the same height. And honestly, the Redemptor might be a little taller in this picture because it's angled a little bit, I think. The photograph is a little bit different. Contemptor Dreadnought's wild. Putting these as having this like being very written out seems like a lot. Like once you go further than that, like how deep does that rabbit hole go, right? What can I use a land speeder javelin as? It feels like I don't know. It's interesting. This one's wild. 3 crisis suits with burst cannon, fusion blaster, and plasma gun can be played as either Sunforged, Star Scythe, or Fire Knife. Okay. So if I have crisis suits with all 3, I can play them with anything. That feels extremely confusing. However, a Sister of Battle with Heavy Flamer cannot be played as a multi-melta. This one's wild. So the interesting thing to me, obviously, some of these places, all of these places require the accurate base size, right? Some of them have very relatively open rules about war gear selection, and some of them have extremely tight rules about war gear selection, which I think is fascinating. And I think it seems to me that the question about WYSIWYG is almost explicitly about war gear, right? It might as well be what, war gear I see is war gear I get, miniatures to some extent, but also like in a lot of cases, if you're looking at a Space Marine army, the differentiation between units is the war gear, right? And so a lot of times those two things are one and the same. And having such a difference of opinion between these events on your weapon selections to make your units easily recognizable is wild to me. I was not under the impression that like a WYSIWYG standard had such a wide variety. But I'm curious to see what people think about this question. Because again, it was something that I didn't really consider to be something that was that had that wide a difference of opinion. A lot of people hop in. 10th edition killed WYSIWYG for me, honestly. And I have seen this. Actually, I've seen this opinion pretty recently. I had some players who were like, well, it's they felt that it was unacceptable for an event to enforce WYSIWYG, which was like wild to me. I was like, whoa. And not even just like, war gear WYSIWYG, but like units. Like it's unacceptable for you to tell me I can't use a Vanguard veteran as a jump pack intercessor. Like, really? Those are just different units. What are you talking about? And that blew my mind. And that has been a paradigm 180 from how the community treated this issue. In 8th edition, for example, if you weren't modeled correctly, especially because war gear costs a lot of points. If you weren't modeled correctly in 8th edition, it was like drama. It was a big thing. I remember back in the day, you could take purity seals back in the day. I think it was like a 1-use reroll leadership test. And it was like 1 point, but you had to take the little purity seal bit from the sprue and put it on your model if they were equipped with purity seals in your army. If you didn't do that, it was actually a big deal, which was wild. If you had a captain with Terminator honors, which gave them +1 attack and the ability to wear the Terminator armor, you had to give them some kind of indication. If they had it the upgrade but weren't in Terminator armor, which cost extra points, you had to give some kind of indication they had Terminator honors. And a lot of times that was required. So that was like 10, 15 years ago. However, even in the last 2 to 3 years, the community has 180'd on war gear loadouts. I do think this to some extent, and I think that this stuff makes sense. You're obviously taking the upgrade as long as it's free, right? However, there gets to be a slippery slope. So what if your squad doesn't have a banner modeled? Because the game uses true line of sight, like a banner in particular is a big deal because it wildly changes the conformation of your model, right? You look very different whether or not you have a banner. The same goes for some vehicle upgrades, right? Let's say the biggest one that always comes to mind for me is the wrecking ball in a truck. Your truck changes quite a bit if you have the wrecking ball modeled, but a lot of places don't require you to do so. Which is curious. An opponent of mine commented at GT this weekend, one of my models attached with a power weapon, which is modeled with a wrench. Just commenting out it was funny. From 9th to 10th, unit special weapons get combined into power weapon. There's no option that looks like a power weapon. WYSIWYG is impossible, and you have to mark which ones have power weapons. In my case, the white stripe on their base. Interesting what model that is. Oh, Adelan Jackals. Oh, yeah. Jackal's wild. Power wrench. That's good. So anyway, chat. What do y'all think? What do y'all think about WYSIWYG? What are we looking at? There was a Terminator Honor badge you had to use if it wasn't on the shoulder. Yeah. Heard some events not allowing a Horus Heresy Vindicator to be used as a 40k Vindicator. Yeah, so that's a big one too. Because if you look at the two, chat, the Horus Heresy Vindicator is dramatically different. And that gets even tougher because it's a hull measuring unit. It's like a tough situation, right? Because a lot of times these kind of things get they get really weird because it becomes kind of a social thing. If a lot of proxies and counts as gets, let's see if I can put this on the screen if it will shrink, gets you basically, there's like a big culture of like asking forgiveness, not permission, right? So you rock up to a table and you're like, hey guy, here are my Vindicators, and they're all Horus Heresy Vindicators. Are you going to say, judge, my opponent's not playing the correct miniatures, and then create a weird situation for the next 3 hours for you and your opponent? Or are you going to say, that's fine, and you go with it? And in some cases, that can give the other player an advantage because look at these things. The 40k Vindicator, if assembled with the Dozer Blade, which I think used to be optional, but I don't think anymore. I think it was an upgrade, actually. You had to buy it. It's so pretty wild. It used to give you rerolls on dangerous terrain checks, I think. So you didn't get stuck on terrain. Who cares? Either way, the 40k Vindicator, this Dozer Blade extends the size of the miniature by like 3/4 of an inch on each of its corners. I think there's a little bit of a difference between the hull too, because the Rhino hull from 30k and the Rhino hull from 40k that the Vindicator is based on are slightly different. But the other thing too is that the big plow, right? In this one, it's a little thing, and here it's a huge fucking brick, essentially, does make a not a not insignificant difference to the size and dimensions of the miniature. And when you're talking about a miniature that hull measures, so that area of the model is actually relevant. These guys also have the thing coming off the back. They have the crane comes off the back. I think that extends them by about a quarter inch or so. So it's larger. It's harder to move around corners. It's in some cases harder to get it so it doesn't touch terrain. It can actually change how the model plays on the table. Now, it's not a huge change. It's not, in 90% of cases, it's not going to make a difference, but sometimes it might. And that's a weird, that's a weird discussion I have to have before the game starts, right? It's like, oh, you have a hull measuring model and you're just using a different miniature as your hull measurer. So that's like a case where I don't necessarily, disagree with an event that may want to mandate that you have to use the 40k Vindicator, not the Legion one from Horus Heresy. But that would be why. That would be why events would mandate one Vindicator model to be used over the other ones. Because they are so different. Is the 30k Rhino the same size as the 40k? I actually have no idea. I assume that they are, but it might be different. I know for a while people were using the old Rogue Trader Rhinos for 40k, and those are way smaller. Those are teeny tiny babies. Same goes for like Orc Trucks. The old Orc Truck from like 3rd edition or whatever is like teeny. It's fucking minuscule. You see somebody rocking up with those things, and you're like, well, and that goes back to the question about old models. You're like, that's a little small. That's gonna fit 10 flash kits in it. All right, man. I don't know. Tough. The solution is to give vehicles bases. I mean, you're bark. Yeah, we're not on your opposite sides of that issue. And to be, if I were to put my tinfoil hat on, Chant, this is something we've talked about in the past. But if I were to put my tinfoil hat on, I would say that I think one of the reasons that Games Workshop doesn't put bases on things and doesn't move away from hull measurement or true line of sight is exactly this. Oh, am I allowed to use not the official Warhammer 40K miniature? Now there's a very reasonable argument to be made that you must use the official one purchased from gamesworkshop.com, right? And I think it's in their best interest to to basically open up these questions to people, you know. Not necessarily that every person will come out and decide that you must use the correct one, but enough people will that I think it will drive people towards buying the correct miniature, right? If I'm a 30K player and I have a bunch of Vindicators, but the culture in my game store is that I have to use the 40K one, now I have to buy twice as many Vindicators, right? So suddenly, Games Workshop is $250 cheaper. Or it's cheaper? Richer. Not cheaper. So, I don't know. That's my theory. That's my tinfoil hat theory. Your local sounds terrible, says Clark. Big tournaments don't care at all. No 3D printed models, so they employ my Games Workshop to crush fun. I don't even use 3D prints myself. I know that's stupid. Custodians basically then aren't allowed tanks. Used to work on LGS where 3D prints were banned. Warhammer had one of the highest margins in the store, so we're petrified and losing business on it. We told them it was stupid because we live in a poor area full of college kids, low-income families. To my mind, it would have been better to build a welcoming community where people can show up with 3D printed miniatures. Yeah, I've said this before. I'm speaking personally as someone who doesn't like. I don't spend a lot of time in game stores, at least anymore. I used to back in the day, and I would always try to buy stuff. But nowadays, I only the time I'm in game stores is when I'm going to events. So I show up to a game store and I give them the event fee and I'll buy some stuff. Maybe I'll buy some snacks. Maybe I'll buy some paints or whatever. And that's the money you make for me. If you tell me I can't use any of my converted or 3D printed models, then you don't get any of that money. I'm simply not going to your store. So I think at this point, speaking personally, and I know I'm just one person, a game store is much greater incentivized to give me or to allow 3D prints because they just increase the size of their player base. Yeah, and I don't think I'm the only person like that. Judge a friendly local game store by their restroom cleanliness. That's not a bad metric. Although sometimes you have a nice local game store that's actually like well managed, but it's just like the bathrooms in the back behind a thing. A lot of times, like because game stores are in many cases based off of retail space, and retail space usually isn't designed to have publicly accessible bathrooms. A lot of times the bathrooms just like from a construction standpoint are kind of shitty. There are some game stores where they have really nice bathrooms because they're like originally like a restaurant or a cafe space that was meant to have forward facing bathrooms for like public bathrooms. And so then they have really nice ones that are all like well done up. But a lot of times you have to like go through the back office to get to the bathroom because they were just like, I don't know, originally this was a shoe store and nobody needed to go to the bathroom. But now that you're coming here and you're sitting there for 2 hours playing a game, suddenly we actually need a bathroom. So we have to go through the back. I don't know. That's interesting. Anyway, chat. I gotta wrap up. I'm actually late for my game. So we're gonna go play Harry Dan in a sec here, folks. Over on Twitch. But I do have to wrap up the stream. I think this is an interesting discussion. I think that there's certainly some room for growth for the community. Here's my Twitch channel, by the way. Go check it out. Go give me a follow over there. I'll probably be live in 15 minutes or so. I think there's some room for growth for the community in terms of the chess clock rules we talked about previously. I think that we need
6,931 donated $5 through Super Chat.
Happy
Could
Hunter.
you look at the sisters post I linked you?
Can we look at the
Also,
sisters
finally
post?
playing the Holy Delve Shift.
I'm overtime here, so we can look at the sisters post in future. I think. I think I might try to play Delve Shift tomorrow, actually. A little bit of a Thanksgiving stream, maybe. But I have games. I believe I will have games scheduled basically today through Saturday. So it's either Sunday or tomorrow. That would happen. But we can look at the sisters post in the future because I'm out of time right now. I can't do it currently. But thank you for the super chat. I appreciate that. But yeah, I think that the WYSIWYG thing is interesting. I think it would behoove the community to come to a standard on that. But a lot of times it probably depends on the venue. The chess clock thing is unacceptable to me. I think that it should not be an open question how chess clocks work in 40K, because we're now at a spot where the game is using them so widespread a capacity that there should be a centralized ruling system for it. And it's, it's crazy. We come up to a tournament, we're like, oh, you timed out, what happens? And we can't answer that. You shouldn't be using chess clocks in the first place, right? If we don't have that answer. And it would be helpful for the community to have a single source for rules. All right. Thanks, Trent. We're gonna go ahead and hop off. Cheers, everybody.